Hi, everyone. Mark DeJesus here, and I want to welcome you to this broadcast where I want to talk about why is love the greatest? Why is it the greatest? This is a simple question, but I think this is something that's very critical and important in the healing and freedom journey and really getting back to the fundamentals of what is so important in the kingdom of God. Do we know what love is? Do we know how to love? Do we really value love the way the Bible talks about it and the way that God intends for us to value love? And so I think in our journey, we need to come to an understanding that God is really emphasizing a foundation that he laid down that we can't keep skipping past anymore. And that is his amazing, continually transformative love. And everything that we see in our world around us, from what we battle inside, from what we see other people battling with, how we relate to them, how we relate to God, it all comes down to a breakdown of love. The overwhelming majority of every email that comes into my inbox, every struggle, every trial, every question comes down to where, quite honestly, love has been compromised. I just finished a series on what is love and worked on that for a little bit and really just wanted to share some nuances of what love is and try to bring some balance to it. I'm going to go further because I'm going to break down some really great insights from 1 Corinthians 13. This is one of them because we need to understand in greater depth what love is. Do you really know that love is the greatest? Is it really the highest value in your life? But let's be honest, it's really difficult to love, isn't it? It's challenging. It's very difficult at times to look at yourself through the lens of God's love for you. It's challenging for so many modern day Christians to live in the beauty of God's love for them. So many senses of feeling distant. He's far away. He's angry at you. He's just continually judging you with no relational development and growth. And it gets reflected in how we love one another. We're really struggling to love one another and get to the heart and the root of the issues that we struggle with in life. My exhortation in this broadcast is to get us back to the fundamental importance of making love our highest value, because the scriptures speak about the power of love being the greatest. Allow me to look at 1 Corinthians 13:13, and then I'm going to rewind back and trail through it a little bit because Paul makes this emphasis here. He says, and now abide faith, hope, and love. These three. But the greatest of these is love. He's emphasizing here, no matter what happens to you, no matter what happens in life, no matter what time period you're living in, no matter where you are, no matter what you're going through, three things are very important in your life. And I think sometimes when these scriptures come up, we need to pause and pay attention to them. And sometimes what we do is we just throw them in with everything else we're listening to, and we don't take in the importance of the message here, of what does it really mean to recognize these three things are going to remain no matter what. Your faith, hope that you carry in your life, love. Those are the three subjects that are very important in your life. And they build upon each other. That's why the foundation of love is so important, because how you process love will determine how you process hope in your life, how you see your life, how you see your circumstances, how you see God, how you see the situations in life, which then leads to how you activate faith, the steps you take, the steps you don't take, what you do, what you say, what you don't say, how you posture yourself moving forward. So my premise is that for the majority of us, whatever you're battling with, maybe it's a mental health battle, a marriage battle, maybe it's some kind of trial or struggle that you're going through. Maybe it's an addiction, or maybe it's just a financial hardship, or just seasons that you're going through that are more challenging than others. It leads us back to the foundation of what does love look like in this situation. But let's be honest, diving into love and really learning what love is, which Paul is saying here, this is more important than all the other things we make important. We make important theological arguments and battles and being right. And we make all these projects and things that we do, which are great. and all these missions and visions and things that we want to go after. We want to change the world. Do you know that it's actually possible to quote unquote change the world according to our standards and yet not have love? I'm going to get into that. Do you know it's actually possible to have a large church, a large ministry, to have a major impact, to be a major influencer and lack love? Do you know that that is possible? I'm going to get into that. Well, why is love so challenging? Well, I'll tell you right up front, and those of you who've gone through my materials, you already know this. Love is challenging because it's harder work. It's easier to just stay in the busyness of life and just keep doing what you're doing and don't pay attention to the things underneath the surface, these seismic eruptions that are taking place that we just tend to ignore. And the language of love causes us to really deal with our hearts, why we do what we do. Why we don't do what we don't end up doing. It causes us to face ourselves. And many times we don't want to face ourselves because we're so filled with shame. We're used to just hiding and living in darkness, putting the fabrication on. And so love calls us for a real relationship. Love calls us to go deeper. Love calls us to see other people through a more thoughtful lens versus, you ever find yourself or find people, let's talk about other people for a second, not you. You ever find other people just, they put someone in a box, they label them so that it's just convenient. They can just stick, that person to this, and they label them, and it makes it so that they don't have to deal with them or think about them or pray for them or even have a posture of love or saying, I need to work on my perception of love for them. No, it's just like, they're this, and we put a label on them to just kind of dismiss them. Now, when you work on love, you have to slow down. You have to make more margin to pay attention to what's going on in life. You walk through the crowd a lot slower because relationship connection is more meaningful. Now, Paul in his writings in the book of Corinthians is writing to a church where a lot is happening and he has to provide a lot of instruction. And he uses his writing to the church at Corinth to give some of his most extensive writing on things like spiritual gifts and order in the church and how to conduct ourselves in a way where things can be done decently and in order, where God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. And how do we establish that amongst ourselves? And Paul greatly valued that as we gather together, there be powerful things that takes place. But interestingly enough, he has to bring out, if I could go back a little bit from 1 Corinthians 13 to 1 Corinthians 12, he closes out all of his instructions by saying, earnestly desire the best gifts, the really fruitful ones. Yes, go for it. Grow in them. Grow in your gifts. Utilize them. Manifest them. But he makes this statement that deserves a Selah. It deserves a pause. He pauses. He makes a statement here that's worth a pause where he says, yet I show you a more excellent way. What he's saying here is I'm going to lay out all these different giftings and explain them and the power that can actually bring heaven into a room. But I have something to tell you. There is a more excellent way. What is the more excellent way? Is it you getting better in your gifting? Is it you having gifting that's so amazing that people gather to you? Is it that you have such accomplishments that people look to you as a guru, as a consultant, as a person of high knowledge? You person has a reputation of being a real influential change. Paul says the more excellent way is that you become known by the love that you carry in your life. Now, I want to tell you, in the world that we live in, you can actually be a quote unquote world-changing influential person and not have love. And Paul brings this out and we ignore it, we ignore it, we ignore it, we ignore it, and we just keep going on with the way that we do things. We chase the machine of our structures, of our wanting to, impact the world. But yet, we haven't sat back and said, you know what? Do I really know how to live in the power of love? There was a day I paused and stopped and looked back at all the ministry experience I had, pastoring at a larger church and even pastoring at smaller levels, a small church level, looking back at my training, looking at the way that I conducted, how I saw things. And I looked at a lot of it and I said, you know what? We're well-intentioned, but the priority wasn't love. The priority was said it was love. See, realize, John said, let's not love and talk, but in word but in deed and in truth, he said. Not just in word, but in deed and in truth. In other words, talk is cheap. And many times today in the body of Christ, we realize our talk is cheap. We put together great presentations because the talk is a part of the presentation. And the presentation is losing its organic connection to people's lives because loving people is really hard work. You can't fast food, drive through love relationship. And we're building large followings and large tribes of people that we want to have a name, that they know our name. And you're not influential. In today's terminology, you are not an effective church unless you are large and highly influential. But do you know that the larger that you get in your organization, I don't know why I keep using air quotes. Do you know what happens when we just feed and feed and feed to get bigger and bigger and bigger? Your organic connection to each person gets smaller and smaller and smaller. If you notice in Jesus' ministry, he fought to keep things small. He actually said, go and tell no one what just happened, which is the opposite of what we do today. He fought to keep things small. He had the 12. Amongst the 12, he had the 70. And amongst the 70, he had the 12. Amongst the 12, he had the 3. And really, let's be honest, God bless John. Amongst the 3, he had the 1. John was the closest to him, for sure. And it's reflected in John's writings because John's writings all direct us to the beauty of what Jesus did in his love and the love that we're meant to have for each other. It's amazing, amazing, the deposits of what he was able to bring out. And so do you realize that the larger you get, the less you are able to actually have organic, deep, meaningful relationship connection? So we live in that world, though, today. We chase the big. It's the McDonald's, the Walmart, the business model of the CEO is the model that we're often serving. I'm not trying to speak against large churches or big churches, but what I'm saying is it is a highway to finding ourselves at a more shallow place of relationships. Why? Because you don't have time anymore. The bigger you get, the more you have to make things efficient, move quicker, streamline them. Many of your interactions become a little more fabricated, a little quicker, move things along. We don't have time. Why? Because I want to reach the most amount of people. When really the reality of reach is about learning how to love. As I'm sharing this with you, it's challenging me. It's challenging my life. It's challenging what I fought for. And the passages that Paul brings here are very challenging because we say, yeah, love is superior. Of course, we got to love people. Across just about every church's banner or ministry banner is love God, love people. Love God, love. That is hard work. Just look into any family, look into any typical Christian, and you'll see love is hard work. But look at our time, look at our day, look at our calendar, look at our appointments. How much of it is actually spent working on how we process love with God and ourselves, and working through actually building the relationship grid in our life? Or is it more like on the agendas and things and all the? And I'm not saying those things are evil. And if people misinterpret me, that's fine. I'm okay with that because I've realized in my life, looking back, there were so many things that I went, wow. The agenda was God. The program was God, not truly just loving people. There's a lot of times of patterns and habits where the priority wasn't love. In fact, many pastors, if they were really honest, would say people just get in the way of what they're trying to do because they're just trying to put together these projects or put together performances and presentations, all in the name of reaching people, but reaching people is one by one by one by one. And so I lay all this groundwork to say, how much do we really invest in how we do relationships? Because that's mental work, it's emotional work, spiritual work. And God will often place us in areas where things in our life reveal we need to grow deeper in what love means. And so this is the more excellent way that Paul's actually leading you into, is not how to just be gifted, but how to actually grow in relationship. And he illustrates it pretty clearly in saying, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels. Now that's pretty impressive. But he says, but have not love. Now, let me just pause there for a second. We live in a world that if you speak with the tongues of men and angels, meaning you have impressive divine gifting flowing through your life, let's be honest, we often don't care if the person has no love or is not relational. We love the presentation and performance. We are okay of big influential leaders, but behind the scenes, they're not very loving. They're not very relational. I've met many of them. I won't get into that. But I realize firsthand, often behind the scenes, the lack of depth of true love that's there. I'm not saying it across the board. I'm just saying it's enough that it's concerning. And Paul says, though I have those impressive things, but I have not love, I become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. So if I sing a beautiful melody and I just take a cymbal and start smashing it, it ruins the beauty of the melody. You don't even hear it. I could have the most majestic sounding voice, but if someone just starts smashing a cymbal, it ruins the beauty of what could take place. And so as I look at this passage of scripture, why is love the greatest? Well, he says it right here. Love is the greatest because it reveals that relationships are the most important thing in life. And a lot of what we do in our busyness, a lot of what we do in our constant going, it's not really about relationships. It's about the next project, the next thing. And how much of what we're doing is really just clanging cymbals? We're exhausted. We're burnt out. We're doing more meetings, more projects, more things, more stuff. Is God really leading us to do all those things? Honestly, folks. Because if I put my value in relationship, it takes time. Relationships are messy. It's hard work. It doesn't go according to the schedule. It takes a little extra time. Love brings us back to what's most important. That's why it's the greatest. It always recalibrates your compass. When I'm going through a hard time, what love does is recalibrate. That me connecting with God, me connecting with myself, me connecting with those around me in fruitful ways, that's more important. And you and I are always in a war where those things get off track. Love is so important. And no matter what you say, if love isn't present, you're just making noise. How many times in our meetings, in our sit-downs, in our discussions, we're just making a lot of noise. I began to realize in my life that I was just making a lot of noise. But this is not a meaningless illustration here he's bringing. Speaking in divine tongues gives the impression you are deeply tapped into the heavens, that you are really connected to something powerful. But he's saying that without love, it's just noise. It's not impressive. It's not impressive. That doesn't show up in our culture today. We get we get very impressed with presentation, performance, execution, accomplishment, achievement. We want the end product. We want the nice show. Oh, that person's really, that's nice. But we're still drawn to the celebrity. And then here's what's interesting. There are many people who bash on megachurch pastors or big movements or big organizations and things like that. We go after them. We call them false teachers or false prophets. They say we just beat on them, right? Well, number one, there's always this angry lack of fruit of the Spirit edge to people who bring out those things. You notice that? You're not drawn deeper into love. You're drawn deeper into I'm right, they're wrong, and there's an edge that doesn't show the fruit of the Spirit. Secondly, we created this. We want Walmart. We want McDonald's. We want all the little things. We want the church to do all these things. We create dances that they need to do. And we get into the buzz of busyness and we say, yeah, this is good. And God, and as it grows in numbers, we just attach God to everything, right? Love gets us back to, wait a second. Maybe at your next ministry meeting together, it'd be good to sit down and go, where are we just banging cymbals? Where are we just banging cymbals? What do we do, but when we do it, it pulls us from love? Meaning it gets us too busy, it gets us lost, right? Think about it this way. If somebody all of a sudden in the world was raising every person they prayed for from the dead, every person, and every person that they prayed for got healed, what would we do? We would literally drain that person worse than dry. Put them on every platform, get them a banner, publication, marketing, all these things. Our system would suck the life out of it. And in many ways, it's what we see in the book of Ephesians, where actually in Revelation, Jesus comes to Ephesus and goes, listen, you guys are a power-packed church. You do a lot of stuff, but you've left your first love, meaning you left the foundation where love was most important. It's a picture of marriage, too, of the roommate syndrome, where you come together in love, the best you know of love, but instead of growing deeper in love, you move into the roommate syndrome. Why? Because children, bills, jobs, busyness, stress, struggle, trial, sickness, things you go through, they create a drift. That's the pull we're in today, folks, it's not about you doing more things, performing more things. My heart aches at people who write emails to me saying, I should do this more. I don't do this enough. No. It's not about that. It's about actually clearing out. It's actually doing less to just get back to the simplicity of what it means to just live in love. Sorry, I get emotional with this stuff because I spend my life helping people who are having nervous breakdowns and mental illness and deep brokenness and trauma. And we need a shift in how we do the things that we put as labels of ministry on people's lives. God's question to us is, do you know how to love? I don't care. I'm not impressed with how great you can preach, although it's wonderful to hear someone communicate things and articulate them in ways that are meaningful. I'm not demeaning teaching gifts. It's something that I have in my own life, or powerful prophetic gifts, or powerful, pioneering kind of giftings. But it's so easy to have a drift. The very thing that God births in you is something that he wants to walk with you in, and we just lose sight of what's important. Love gets us back to what's important. Do you know how to love is more than just you and Jesus? Growing up, I feel like the emphasis was on you and Jesus. You got to get with God, you and Jesus. But me and my brother in Christ, me and my sister in Christ, that was looked at as like, that's kind of like, that's just that fellowship stuff. Okay, enough of fellowship. We need to get with God and we need to get with Jesus. Yeah, we need to get with God. But my relationship with God flows out of how I relate to you. If I say that I'm spiritual, mature, growing in God, and it doesn't reflect in me being a better husband, I need to recheck what I'm saying I'm growing in. If what I am cultivating in my relationship with God does not make me more patient, more kind, more loving, more able to roll up my sleeves, more able to be present with my family, I got to check what I'm following as a guide. Because love always brings us back to relationship. What are we doing? That's just making a lot of noise. And that's why love is the greatest. Now, verse 2, because I'm going to get into some more reasons. Paul goes further. And he's going to kick it up a notch. As though tongues of men and angels isn't impressive enough, he says, let's say I have the gift of prophecy and I understand all mysteries. In other words, whatever subject you bring to him, boom, he's got the download, and you're amazed, right? People love that today. We gather on videos and watch online, and we sit enamored with people with an impressive knowledge. And let's say everything you want to ask about the future, the end times, creation, where the dinosaurs come from, all these things, and the Nephilim, and all those subjects, right? And he was able, boom, 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 able to give you beautiful pictures and answers. And have all knowledge, right? The picture he's painting here is somebody everybody would gather around. We would all flock in droves. And he's saying, have the faith I could remove mountains. He uses some strong language here. He says, but have not love. I'm nothing. He's not using this to say you're nothing. If love is a struggle in your life. But what he's doing is illustrating in himself who he thinks he is doesn't have the meaning he thinks it has. I'm moving mountains, doing all these things. No. Because the power of what love does, again, number one is it brings us the relationships are the most important thing in life. And love is always anchoring us to what's really important. I want to pause on a regular basis and ask myself, am I living towards what's most important in my life? Because we live in a culture where we accept giftings without relational depth. Somebody can be amazing on stage, terrible behind the scenes, and that's okay. But that's what we cultivate because we want the end result. Just grow this, make it bigger, keep doing this, keep bringing in the money or bringing in the followers, and then we get upset. This is the interesting thing. Then what happens is when a minister or a leader falls or we realize there are problems then what we do is we attack and point the finger. We don't collectively say, we need to change. God have mercy. We need to give back to what's really important. We need to give back to what really matters. So what happens is when you develop platforms, you develop these things, you put all your investment into that. This is why pastors all of a suddenly neglect their children or neglect their wives. Why are they neglecting those areas? Because that doesn't have the same kind of pull every moment as the stage does. The stage has a pull. The next thing, the next event, I got to show up. I got to make sure it happens. So it's easier to neglect other things. What love does, it says, nah. So you had a great event that day? Who cares? What are you saying? We're winning souls. We're helping people. Paul's going, man, I'm changing the world, doing all this stuff. So see, without love, what we value then becomes what we put our time into, what we chase, what we focus in on. But they're out of priority to what love points to. Without love, you become impressed by people for the wrong reasons. And what I want to encourage you is I want us to leave a mark on people's lives, one by one, by one, by one. It's not so much what you can do for a presentation, but what you can do behind the scenes in who you really are on a day-to-day basis. I want to get out of being impressed by things that don't matter. All right? Let's get to the real issues. Because we're so lost in the doing of life that we forgot the being of life. That we're human beings, not human doers. So allow me to propose to you Paul in his exhortation saying you could have the largest church, the most popular ministry, the best-selling book, the most successful business. If you don't have love, it's very impressive to man. But if you're disconnected in the one-on-one, that's why I tell you, pastors, leaders, you're helping others, put more of your investment in the one-on-one. Put more of your investment in growing relationally. Start in your home, start in your parenting. Let all of ministry flow out. You see, we're still recovering from a misprioritized ministry life. And people who grew up as pastors' kids, you know this because you grew up in this. The priority list was God, right? Then what? Then ministry, then home. And it's like, wait a second. If God is the priority, then I'm going to value what he values, and he's called us first to be ministers in our home, in our household, and to our children. That's the priority. That's where everything, then ministry flows out of that, right? And in this priority number one of God, what does that mean? It means taking the time for your heart to receive the important things of relationship, of cultivating that connected relationship to the love that God has for you. Now, as though Paul could be any more magnanimous, he kicks it up even more. Verse 3, though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. And this really gets confusing for a lot of people because you say, wait a second, isn't that the ultimate act of love that you give of yourself, right? Because this is what we promote today is a performance-driven kind of living. Love people, love people, love people, love people, love people, love people, love people. Wait a second. Loving people is an overflow of what I've received. What I have, I give to you. Authentic ministry is me flowing out of what God's done in my own life. My story becomes a gift to you. My journey becomes a gift to you. I give out of what's in my hand, what's in my life, where I've been and where I'm going. And see, we think, oh my goodness, look at that person in that other country. Look at that person, how much they give. Look at how much they sacrifice. Wow, what an act of love. I don't know. Paul says it's possible to actually not have love. Now, I'm going to propose to you, how could that happen? How could someone be burned alive for the sake of Christ and not have love? I'm going to give you one. I'm not trying to be an expert on this, but I'll give you one. Many times we will do desperate things to finally have a sense of God loves me and approves of me. And many people can go to desperate measures and not realize what's their driving force inside. They haven't found the satisfying, fulfilling love of the Father for their hearts. So they keep doing, and they never feel loved and satisfied because love is not earned. It's received from the Father who sent his Son to die for us. It is his work on the cross we receive, and freely as I've been given, I freely give it out. We can be so absent of love. I know I did. I know sometimes on a worship stage, and I'd be leading worship, and there were times where my voice would amplify more, and I would just scream out with just a little bit more of a, oh God, and what was it? It's like, I need to get your attention, right? I'm just saying, many times we can do very ultimate acts, and we're still trying to earn God's love for us. I've read many people, some of the names, if I said them, you'd know them, who've written in their own writings their struggle for the longest time of ever being able to connect to the love of the Father, yet most of their lives were spent being known for giving out. It's not to condemn them. We appreciate them. It doesn't make everything they did useless, but it's learning. We have to learn that the deeper thing is what love is going to lead us to. What does it mean to receive love? Do we earn love? Do we do all this stuff? Think about why you do the things that you do. Do you do it to earn the love of God? To earn and feel? Oh, because we love to do great things. I'm going to be honest. We love to do things to feel good about ourselves. Oh, I gave to that person. Oh, I just feel. We show it as a way of, hey, look what God is doing, but we want to feel better about ourselves. I work a lot behind the scenes, and I've constantly observed the dangerous erosion of people who are often looked at as the biggest givers, who sacrificially give. And then sometimes you say to them, hey, why don't you take a break? And they say this to you. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about me. I want you to understand many times those people are actually saying, I'm uncomfortable with love. So what I do with my giving is a distraction of my own pain. I hope you hear my heart. I'm just calling us to go deeper. Because many of them, I've worked with them. They have a blank disconnect to receiving love. And their minds, their hearts just keep eroding. And they don't know how to just be loved. And they become one with the identity of serving. And what happens is organizations, churches, ministry groups, we pull on these people because whenever you call, they're always there. And boy, we appreciate their loyalty and faithfulness, right? But never mindful of, do I just call this person and just put them to work? Have I learned to develop a relationship? Because see, when it comes to the world of love, it's the greatest because love points us back to receiving what Christ has already done for us. And it's not, I've got to give my body to be burned and somehow it's going to earn a sense of love. Now I proved I love God. Or giving everything I have to the poor. Is that going to be the final signal that you're worth being loved and God's now finally happy with you? This is very challenging, isn't it? It causes us to look at our motives. And I'm not telling you to stop giving to the poor or stop giving of yourself wholeheartedly. What I'm asking you to do is be more mindful of learning to receive that love because we're cultivating a culture of burnout and cultivating a world of shallow Christian living where we don't have meaningful, grounded depth in love. I'm going to go further in my exhortation, and then we're going to land this a little bit about why love is the greatest. And here's some things I've learned and I've seen. Why is love the greatest? Because we're born for love. You were born for love. We all have a need for love. Every person you are looking at and interacting with and talking to has a story of love needed in their life in some way, in multiple ways, in many different ways. When you sit down and hear someone's story, it actually changes your perspective on people because you realize we all have issues and struggles, and we all need a deeper experience and revelation of God's love. Love invites God's heart into the situation. That's why it's so important. When I tune into love, I am more tuned into God's heart over the matter. It's easy to judge. It's easy to condemn. It's easy to accuse. It's easy to get into anger. My prayer is, God, give me your heart for this person. Give me your heart for this situation. That takes time. That takes slowing down. It takes being more thoughtful. It takes not just moving on and just mindlessly going through life. Love is the greatest because beneath every struggle and every battle is a heart that needs love. And many times our battles and struggles come out of a lack of love or compromised love or an area where love was not equipped in our heart and life. I'll tell you what, when you love, you start to get more acquainted. When you learn to live in love, you start to become more familiar with why people do the things they do. You become more aware of why they don't do the things that they want to do. You become more aware of, I learned this a lot in pastoring, that when you get down to the grassroots level, down to the day-to-day level of people's lives, you'd understand what makes them tick, what makes them move, what makes them do what they do. When I'm grounded more in love, it develops my empathy and my compassion. Empathy is the ability to feel what somebody else is going through, to slow down, and I'm able to work that compassion because you receive from God, you flow out. You also receive from good people around you that pour out. That's the flow of love we were meant to live in. That the power of love, it's the greatest because it keeps me living with mercy, that I begin to lean more towards mercy. The Bible says that mercy triumphs over judgment. We're so quick to just judge, so quick to execute judgment, which often it's not the first response. The first response is mercy because God's mercy is new. It's here. The beauty of his mercy is how God looks at us with his love in the midst of our suffering, our sin, and our struggle. He sees us through love. And he freely pours it out to you. He's just asking you freely pour it out to others. When I'm in love, when I'm learning love, it keeps me focused on relationship priority. Am I each day learning to love my wife, to love my children, my neighbor as myself? And the cool thing about love is it shows you what is needed in a given moment. Because there's times where the love of God is there and you just need to listen. Sometimes you need to just not talk, but just listen. Sometimes you need to just give an act and give out strategically. Because God's love will direct you. You know what? This person needs help in this way. Why don't you pray for them? Love pays attention. Even you think of somebody, you're just walking along one day and all of a sudden somebody comes to your mind and it's a cue to actually start praying for them. Love keeps us grounded in what's needed. Maybe what that person needs is you just write a check out for them and say, here, I'm going to stand in for you financially. Love does that. Really, in reality, you can't go wrong learning to genuinely grow in love. You just can't. The world lives under the brokenness and bondage of sin, yet it's the love of God that brings the fulfilling antidote and cry to mankind's heart. That work of Christ in his death and resurrection brings an invitation for that love to be brought for all those who want to receive. But you and I are the vessels. And I'm not just telling you go out and just do. I'm actually, in some ways, going to tell you to slow down, to stop, to pause. Paul said this. He closed out his teaching on what love looked like, which I'll get into more in some other episodes. But he says, love never fails. Can we pause for a second? That's an amazing thought, that if you are operating in love, it never fails. It always leaves a deposit that's eternal. That's, wow. It means it's not going to burn. So I'm going to lean towards love. He says, whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part, we prophesy in part. People take this theology into all kinds of different theological directions out of this passage. That's not my intent here. But he says, but when that which is perfect has come, which I believe that which is perfect has come is the return of Christ, then that which is in part will be done away. And I believe Jesus' return is going to bring a fulfillment. But in the meantime, you and I are growing in the power of faith, hope, and love. Now, interesting, nestled in the midst of this, he makes this statement. He says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Love is important because it causes you to grow and mature. And many of us are still in childish ways. We still have childlike ways in our lives. It's like we have immature, childish aspects of our life that God's love needs to come as a father to father us, to mature us, and bring us up in his ways. I recognized in my life, in my journey, that I was so advanced in certain areas of leadership and organization, where it's like if I was in my early 20s, I was like 35, 40 when it came to certain areas of leadership, but I was still 12, 13, 14, when it came to certain relationship things. And isn't it interesting that you can live with that tension and still just keep excelling, achieving, and moving forward? Because those unhealed, undeveloped areas where Paul says, I'm still talking like a child, I've got to learn to put away and make that transition. That is what love does, is it meets us where we are, but it grows us from toddler stage to adolescence, to young adult, to becoming young sons and daughters, to then becoming fathers and mothers in our life. That's what love does. I believe it's time for us to grow like never before. And Paul says, you know what? This is really encouraging to me. He says, now we see in a mirror dimly. That's amazing. Paul's saying on his best day, the lens is still foggy. And that encourages me because I feel like on my best day, I don't see a whole lot of things very well. But you know what I can trust in? The power of God's love to carry me step by step by step. He says, but then face to face. One day I am going to, when that which is perfect has come, I'm going to see him face to face and things will be clearer. Questions will be answered. But until then, he says, I know in part now, but then I shall know just as I am also known. Like the amazing thing of like being able to, on that day, getting that sense of clarity. Why do I tell you all that? He's like, because he's saying we got all this tension and stuff going on and growth that needs to happen, right? And there are things that in our life, what can we rely on? He's saying, well, rely on that faith, hope, and love, but just focus in on these three things, faith, hope, and love. And the greatest is love. That's why even in thought, I encourage people to say, how do I know thoughts are from God? Well, of course, we want to utilize his word, but are we seeing his word through faith, hope, and love? Because that's what it's meant to build in your life. Truth that sets you free, not adds to the chains. I talk about power, love, and sound mind. But I've found so much help in my life when I invest in love, which then fuels my hope, which then empowers the faith in my life. Love is the greatest. And I invite you to take that journey with me of learning what it means to be loved, to live in that love. If this broadcast was a blessing to your life and encouragement to you and to those you are blessing, consider a one-time donation. You can also become a regular supporter. I am giving of myself fully to this because what God has done in my life has really changed dramatically how I see, how I think, how I live. And I got rooted back in the value of love, and I'm continuing to root my heart in his love. If you're wanting to learn who God is as a father, as a loving father, and begin to experience that more, I encourage you to get a copy of Experiencing God's Love as Your Father. If you want to take that and dive further, I expose the root of rejection we all carry because of our fatherlessness, because of the lack of inputting of a father's heart and equipping in that and what it leads to. You want to see yourself in the love that God has for you. God loves me and I love myself has been an amazing resource for so many people. And of course, my recent book I'll recommend, The Heart Healing Journey, takes you on an equipping process to deal with the issues that face the life of your heart in an effective way. But most of all, I'm just glad to be a blessing to your life and to your journey. And I pray that you'll be blessed by this. Share it with others and let it add faith, hope, and love to your life. I'll see you in the next broadcast.